My name is Cole Pugh. Today I'm going to talk about the welding basics. So I'm just talking about three different types of welding here. It's some main types of welding. We're going to talk about, they call it stick welding. SMAW is shield metal arc welding. And then our next one, we're going to talk about TIG, which is gas tungsten arc welding. And our third one we're going to talk about in my slideshow is MIG, which is gas metal arc welding. And there's someone welding right there in the picture. And this is what my slideshow is going to be about today. What is welding? Welding is a fabrication process that joins materials, usually metals or thermoplastics, by using heat or melt the parts together and allowing them to cool, causing fusion, which was when they come together. Here's some fun facts. I'm going to talk about welding right here. Over 50% of all man-made products were created by welding. Everything from cars, homes we live in has been touched by welding. Welding as a career is always in demand. Welding will never go away in our society. All our metal parts and everything like that, our trailers, they're all welded together. The concept of welding has been around, it's been around for centuries. Evidence is even present in the tombs built by Egyptians in 1961. GM installed the first robotic welding arm called the Unimate. It weighed 2 tons and was created to spot weld. And during World War II, there had been such an advancement in welding that it allowed for ships to be made in hyperdrive. The quickest ship made only took 4 days, 15 hours and 27 minutes. This was in 1942, and that record still holds strong today. No one's beat that since 1942. If 2 pieces of metal without an oxidized layers are applied together with enough pressure, a weld will form called a cold weld, welded with pressure instead of heat. Cold welds are often used in space equipment, which is pretty interesting. And here we'll talk about our stick welding for our first slide about welding. Stick is the common name for shield metal arc welding, and also known as manual metal arc welding or flux arc welding. Flux shield arc welding is a type of welding process that uses a consumable electrode coated in flux to join metals. It is one of the oldest and most versatile welding processes and is commonly used in construction, maintenance, and repair work. Since it is very easy to learn, is the first welding process for most welders. They say stick welding is the most easiest. I agree that MIG welding is the easiest weld to produce. It is messier than the other 2 welds we will talk about MIG and TIG. Those produce 2 cleaner welds than the stick weld because of the slag it will produce on top of the weld that has to be knocked off. And if you really want your weld to look clean, you have to put a wire brush to it and really clean it up. We're going to talk about the numbers on our welding rods. All types of welding rods are used for different scenarios. We're going to talk right here. Here's a little example. The E stands for electrode, and the first 2 numbers will explain the tensile strength on our rod. The 3rd number is the positions you can weld in, whether it's overhead or horizontal. The 4th is the type of coating in which current you're going to run your certain rod at, whether you're at AC or DC negative or DC positive. And here's an example. We're going to talk about our 6010 right here. Here's a chart of a few other rods and the numbers. We got our E stands for electrode. 60, the first 2 numbers that are on there, you times your first 2 numbers by 10,000 because that'll be your 10,000 pounds of tensile strength. So we got 60,000 pounds of tensile strength on our 6010 rod. The 1, it'll stand for all positions. And the 0 is the current you'll be used at, which is DCE positive, and that's the only one you want to run your 6010 rod at. And like on our 7018, our coating is a iron powdered low hydrogen coating. You can still weld it in all positions, but your current is different. You can weld it in DCEP DC positive and an AC with 70,000 pounds of tensile strength. How you weld with stick. There are lots of different ways you can weld with stick. The wet method, drag circles, you can draw triangles, they say even, and it all just depends on a lot of his preference, what is easier for you to weld with, what you're welding on, how big your gap is, how thin or how thick your metal is. And when you weld your rod always needs to be at a 15-degree angle. Even whether you're welding around pipe, you always want that rod at a 15-degree angle from where you have it at. Now we're going to talk about our TIG welding. TIG welding is an arc welding process that uses non-combustible tungsten electrode to produce the weld. TIG welding is considered the most difficult and most skilled welding because you have to feed the rod with one hand and weld with the other, as well as you have a foot pedal to adjust your temperature on your weld, so you don't just, like any other machine, you would set your temperature. On TIG welding, you use a foot pedal to adjust your heat, whether you want it colder or hotter. TIG welding can produce a clean and precise weld on a wide range of base materials, making it look good, making it a good look for critical welds like those found in aerospace, food and beverage equipment fabrications, high purity processing, and motorsports applications. Always comes out as a real clean weld, but you also need a really clean workspace as to go on your weld. No paint or anything like that needs to be in your way when you are TIG welding, so you can get a really good ground on it. Connection to your weld. The materials that you can weld on for TIG, it's a lot different than stick. You got carbon steel, alloy steel, stainless steel, high resistant alloys, refractory metals, aluminum alloys, magnesium alloys, and beryllium alloys. When you go on TikTok and you look at all these people, they make these rainbow color welds and it looks all pretty, has all the cool colors. That's what your TIG welding is. The tools you will need to be able to TIG weld. Here's a good picture. It demonstrates everything you need. You need your insert gas supply. You need a welding machine, your workpiece, of course. It shows where your gas passage comes through right there, and your piece of tungsten. And it kind of explains some of it right there. You need your metal filler rod and your ground clamp also, so you can get your connection from your welding machine, your insulating sheath, which goes on the outside of your tungsten. And of course you need your TIG torch to weld with also. TIG filler rods, this is a big thing right here. These rods are made of special metals, special metal alloys to withstand high heat and not lose their characteristics after melting and solidifying. The thickness of these rods, of the rod determines the amount of filler metal deposited after you dab it in the metal pool, the weld pool, but it also determines the amount of energy needed to melt that rod diameter. The American Welding Society classifies TIG wires just as MIG solid wires, so they kind of have the same concept, but MIG is a lot more simpler. It's a lot more simple way of welding with it. They both fall under the A5.18 carbon steel electrodes and rods for gas shielded arc welding standard because they are essentially the same. MIG wires are in spools, and a big spool of wire that will feed through your gun, while TIG welding rods are cut into TIG suitable lengths where you feed them in with one and then you work your gun with your other hand. The standard filler rod for TIG welding is the ER70S 2 TIG welding rod is the most common used for TIG welding. We'll talk about the letters and what they mean, just like we did on our stick rod. The TIG rods, they mean the same thing. They have the numbers to determine what you're going to use them for and how they work. The letters ER stand for electrode rod, and I guess it just has a rod, R for the rod, I guess. In case of MIG wire, it's the electrode, while in the case of TIG cut wire, it's an R rod. There it is. Nevertheless, the filler rods are sold with ER in their name, just not R. Number 70 stands for tensile strength in 1,000 PSI increments. So the tensile strength in ER70S2 is 70,000 PSI. It's a tensile strength the same as with your stick welding rods. The letter S stands for solid, and C means composite. The final digits indicate the chemical composition. In this case, the number 2, this is what separates different rods for welding mild steel. The fill rod here is a little chart on our filler rods and kind of how you would size it up to your metal thickness to your filler rod diameter right here. So you see 1/16 inch, you're going to use that on your 16th inch gap, and then you use your 3/32 inch metal thickness to your 16th or your 3/32 inch. So it kind of it's pretty close in the size of your rod, how the diameter of how thick your metal is about the same as your filler rod. And we're going to talk about MIG welding, our last one we're going to talk about today. MIG welding is a versatile technique suitable for both thin and thick metal. It's really good. An arc is struck between the end of a wire electrode and the workpiece, melting both of them to form a weld pool. This is considered the easiest type of welding because it does not take much skill. It is also a very easy cleanup. Your welds come out clean. There's no slag on top you have to break off, and it's very simple to weld your MIG. What material can you MIG weld with? There's carbon steel, aluminum, magnesium. You got copper and nickel, and silicone bronze. MIG welding is really easy on your small little projects you have at the house and everything like that. Now, when is MIG welding used? MIG welding is used in different scenarios, including on cars and vehicles. A lot of your exhausts are used with MIG welding. In pipeline welding, they also have those big jobs you use your MIG welding with. Small household items, it's very simple and clean weld. Your MIG welding wires, what we're going to talk about now. Solid MIG welding wire requires shielding gas like your TIG welding. Either 100% CO2 or 75% argon, 25% CO2 mixture for mild steel. This solid wire is spooled up and fed through the MIG welding gun using a wire feeding mechanism. It's used for welding mild steel, stainless, and aluminum. Mostly, that's the most common metals you're going to weld with MIG. How to MIG weld, here's just a little bit how to MIG weld. It's very simple. You can either use a drag method or you can use the little wet method where you go back and forth in and out of your puddle. When you just drag it, it's going to make more of just a solid weld, which when you whip it, it'll show where your puddle you came in and out of your puddle. Both very effective ways of MIG welding. MIG welding has a spool gun that the wire runs out of, so it makes it easy to weld because unlike TIG welding, you must feed the wire through your own hands, so it makes it a lot more simple.